I'm a priest of the Temple of the Divine. Oh, hey, I'm Ras Timotheos. I'm priest of a Temple of the Divine, and I'm here to speak about spirituality and cannabis and spirituality. And this is from a mystical, ancient, more indigenous understanding of um, the occult and mystical practices as it pertains to cannabis and spirituality, mystical experiences, religious experiences, and so forth. So, um, as we all know, cannabis has the ability to activate that which exists within all of us, man and woman, equally, and it stimulates this vigor energy that allows us to reach certain universal states of experience. And so um, and so we're dealing with universal states of perception, observation, awareness, consciousness. We're dealing with um, a deeper concept than just ordinary um, plants interacting with human biological functions. We're dealing with plants that are interacting with human biological functions that interact with consciousness, and consciousness interacting with the environment, awareness interacting with the environment, a whole metaphysical, beyond the physical understandings of things. So the cannabis plant has been known throughout history to and for its psychoactive properties, and it is through this function that the plant has, in this day and age, reached its cultural value for that which it is. So besides the sufficient medical evidence found within the previous years about cannabis, there's one thing that is certain, and that is its ability to connect us to universal states of awareness and bring upon the potential of healing from, a mystical and an unknown reality. Um, so the existence of the cannabis plant is special because the substances which make up the plant, so the specific properties um, interact with us, our bodies, our biological functions, our biochemistry, and these properties interact with our inner functions in a specific way to give us these unique mystical properties or gifts. So these substances exist within us through a specific system of the body, and this body is known as the endocannabinoid system. The cannabis plant, is the only plant that exists outside of us that contains these compounds or these chemicals outside of us, as well as to be able to interact with the chemicals that exist within us. So the fact that the cannabis plant is the only plant that is known to influence the psyche in this way, as well as, see, when I say the psyche, I mean consciousness, awareness, the spiritual awareness, as well as ordinary mundane awareness. So these specific chemicals can unite with us and bring about a spiritual experience. The specific endocannabinoids or inner substances actually affect the holistic part of us, man and woman alike. Um, so the cannabis plant is natural and becomes non-toxic um, due to the chemical affinity in which it shares with us and that which we share with the plants, all animals, all, the sky, even other planets, other star constellations, um, different things like that, other galaxies. So these these inner substances affect us in a holistic way, not just in a linear, mundane way. So the cannabis plant is non-toxic due to the chemical or biological affinity in which we share with the earth. So the endocannabinoids within us and the endocannabinoid system um, within us, as well as the endocannabinoids within a cannabis plant, is the beginning where um, the cannabis plant actually shows its presence, known to modern science as being the regulators of homeostasis, the production and reproduction and the preservation of life within the body on earth and within the universe, a holistic perspective. So universally, the cannabis plant actually affects the holistic part of man and woman, all of us alike, which has the ability to unite mind and body workings, the inner workings for the potential of healing and universal spiritual understanding. So in this manner, the cannabis plant is a holistic part of the earth and is to be used as a practical source for spiritual health and growth. Actually, the cannabis plant activates the psyche, which balances the spiritual forces within the mind and body of us, of our psyche, of our awareness, of our consciousness. The holistic properties of the cannabis plant allow man and woman to see and know the truth to reality. The truth being found within the experience, and one who experiences the truth knows and understands from a universal perspective. Um, this experience involves the interaction between the earth or the elements, mind, and body, as well as the observation and understanding of the self and the universe. So awareness of the self-awareness, and then awareness of the universe, as well as the interaction between the environment, the elements within us and outside of us, and the environment within our minds, our states of consciousness, as well as the environment within our physical body, our biological consciousness, our biological awareness. The cannabis offers its self as, a spiritual healer, a spiritual teacher, a universal teacher of all spiritual and metaphysical, natural and living and non-living information of these realities. So it is within the prehistoric data that we find the prevalent uses of cannabis, or the spiritual uses of cannabis, and it is through the archaic connections between the earth and the universe that we as man and woman, through our minds, begin to know ourselves from a spiritual perspective through the earth and the universe, and through the cannabis as a gateway to the universal parts of the psyche of ourselves, the deeper aspects of ourselves. So spirituality in cannabis refers to the true consciousness, or the true awareness that relates us as man and woman in balance to our higher selves and to a universal perspective of our realities, to be able to see and know ourselves from a higher a universal perspective, a spiritual perspective. Spirituality is deeper than the reflection of self within the universe as life and animation in the universe. It is through spirituality that the mind and body evolve in harmony with the laws of nature. So spirituality involves partaking in the elements of Mother Nature and involving the ideas of divine life force principle within one's life, and it becomes part of their reality. So spirituality comes out of the acts which one takes in order to know the truth and to become one with the universal perspective of life within themselves. So spiritual acts involve meditation, purification, regeneration of the mind and body of the practitioner, of the initiate. These acts are done with a specific intent, and in turn is expressed as ritual and ceremony. These specific acts allow one to reach, at one-ment with the universal selves, and the spiritual state of mind. The spiritual factor about cannabis is that it is of the divine creative force because it is of nature. The plant is grown from seed and out of the mother principle, and so it bears fruit for man and woman to eat and know its truth. It is of the lineage of life because it does bear fruit. The spiritual notion of the use of cannabis may present itself in many ways, and it stems from the awareness or the consciousness of the one experiencing. The intent of using cannabis as a spiritual substance is a normal act of man and woman wanting to better know and understand themselves and the nature of themselves. Like I was saying, from a physical awareness, a spiritual awareness, or self-awareness. And then there's the soul awareness, the divine awareness, the God awareness of self. So it is the intent of using cannabis as a spiritual substance is a normal act of man and woman in balance within us, wanting to better understand ourselves and our environments on multiple levels, the metaphysical levels. The use of cannabis as a spiritual substance is performed through personal will of the spiritual practitioner and through their intent. So the whole cannabis plant in and of itself is a representation of life. Cannabis has the ability to become a spiritual messenger or teacher, a spiritual guide, according to one's beliefs in our spiritual, metaphysical, beyond the physical realm, the mystical understanding. So all plants which bear fruits and seeds are a product of earth or Mother Nature, the divine feminine aspect of self, which is represented in the earth consciousness. So nature is created for the so everything that is a product of nature is created for the use of man and woman in balance to further evolve life force within this planet and within this universe, within ourselves, and within our understandings of ourselves within the universe. So cannabis allows the spiritual practitioner or the mystical initiate to transcend consciousness and experience planes of existence that only a spiritual state of mind can perceive and understand. So cannabis may give the universal divine inspiration in the form of wisdom and through experience. So Divina Sapientia, or the states of gnosis, is in a religious context or a spiritual mystical context, the indigenous spiritual mystical context, gives us divine, universal divine inspiration or wisdom of ourselves. Light, it gives us divine light, awareness of ourselves on multiple levels of understanding. The spiritual uses of cannabis have been known throughout history for over 5,000 years of, just recorded history. During prehistoric periods, meaning before history, before written history, shamans and monks specifically seeking unity within themselves of the spiritual forces or the spiritual congregations of spiritual entities within themselves would they would use this cannabis plant to enter in a spiritual state of awareness or spiritual state of consciousness to understand and become in tune with the universe and the awareness of themselves within the universe. So the spiritual properties of cannabis plant were encountered in many ways, and it's likely that that most of the world's major religions were all once impacted by cannabis in their formation at one time or another. So nowadays, the spiritual properties of the plant are not specified by mainstream society and culture, and the true meaning of cannabis and its properties and its mystical understandings has been washed out over the decades of misunderstanding. So as today that the temple of the divine is raising that spiritual understanding, that spiritual gnosis, the spiritual awareness that this cannabis plant has divine properties. So the first uses of cannabis were for spiritual atonement or at one within self, as well as a medicine used by ancient sages and mystics. That's the sages, the mystics, the priests. These are the shamans, the monks. These are the same people throughout different cultures. Medicine man, woman, things like that. There were no such thing as recreational use of cannabis because it was either used as a medicine or a way to spiritually evolve. So the cultivation of the seeds and the growing of the plant more years down the timeline allowed the plant and its uses to change. So the hemp fibers were used for pretty much anything from clothes to rope, and the seeds were used for a source of vitamin and mineral, and obviously the flowers were used for their healing potential and psychoactive properties, for spiritual transformation and healing. So the first form of ingestion of cannabis plant was either eaten or chewed. The spiritual effects were found to be applied in many ways, and then they realized that they can heat it up and put fire to it or put heat to it. And then within the spiritual and religious communions or the priestly congregations, they would perform rituals, group rituals and gatherings, and communicate with the divine gods and goddesses of their pantheons, their spiritual understandings, their cultural understandings of the divine. So the spiritual substance then started to be started being applied in many different forms. So the cannabis leaves, flowers, and resins were made into specific mystical elixirs, as well as burned on hot coals for rituals of healing and spiritual communication with the divine. So the priest in the temple, according to this divine aspect, refers to the spiritual character which has undergone this regeneration or purification process, or obtained at oneness, or the state of being at one with the universal creative substance within self. The priest represents the ideas of spirituality guiding the mind and body as a natural function of man and woman in balance, and our levity to know and understand the universal creative source within us, to know our divine spark. So when man and woman in balance begin to realize the universal creative source and build a spiritual temple, this means they are becoming to the realization to create a relationship in mind, self, body, and the awareness of this universal substance. This represents the transitional stage within spiritual growth of the mind and body. Within the mind, it represents the establishment of new, higher, or mystical states of consciousness where man and woman in balance begin to take upon a spiritual character, and his and her mind and body, thoughts and feelings are united in one. So the spiritual acts of man and woman create a temple mentally and physically, which allows them to become the priests and priestess and realize the ultimate reality of universal substance, or the divine spark within self. The actions are considered rites and ceremonies in which the priests in the temple conduct in order to obtain at one with their higher self, the universal self. So, which is the spiritual perception of reality through the realization of the universal substance. The acts which are performed, such as meditation and lighting of the incense, represents the action of spiritual energy and forces, or the universal substance, developing and forming within the body of man and woman in balance, and during this process forms the temple. So regeneration occurs after atonement or at-one-ment and involves a combination or spiritual joining of mind and body through mental, chemical, and spiritual processes. The unification of mind and body and spirit begins in awareness or consciousness through the conscious mind, and it is expressed through the subconscious mind as behavior and action. This forms the basis to the spiritual acts of the priest in the temple, as well as the formation of the temple and the unification of the spiritual substance of the universe within mind, mental, and body, physical. The temple is the foundation of the spiritual man and woman which take upon the title of the priest. The priest has built an understanding and realization of the universal spiritual substance within, and it has established a spiritual character. The priest is a spiritual being or mystical being, a teacher, as well as a student of the earth, who lives according to the universal laws and the laws of nature, the laws of the universe, laws of nature. The priest must gain a relationship with the divine or the unseen aspect of nature and the universe through opening the pathway between the psyche, the mind, and the soul, as well as the physical body or the spiritual realm and the physical realm. So the mystical realm and the physical realm. The priest partakes in the elements of the earth and gives offerings to the universe through certain practices. Through those offerings within the temple, the priest may receive divine inspiration directly from universal source within itself. So, building a spiritual body, man and woman in balance must become aware or gain knowledge or experience the divine nature of self of through working with ourselves to unite with the higher nature of ourselves or the higher self. So man and woman must incorporate divine and spiritual thoughts into their consciousness, and this incorporating or incorporation of thoughts builds an understanding through complete first-hand experience with the universal substance within self, and also ultimate realization of the higher self. So the priest performs daily acts of spiritual work in order to universally unite the mind and body and spirit. It is through the lighting of incense or the partaking of cannabis as a sacrament or a holy divine substance in the religious rites endowed by the priest are used to live in accord with the divine laws of nature, or the divine laws that create awareness of the physical body, as well as the functions of the physical body in and of itself. So the spiritual acts allows the priest to become aware of the transcendental reality that exists within and outside of self, and is a way for the priest to find and understand himself through nature, or the nature of self, or the nature of who we truly are as human beings, as beings on this planet Earth. So the building of the spiritual body temple involves the divine creative substance within the body and mind. The spiritual senses must be activated. The priest activates a state of mind through the partaking of cannabis congruent to the universal state of realization. The priest then builds a spiritual body according to his or her understandings of self and the universe. The way one achieves this is personal and is done with a spiritual intent. This involves activation of the universal states within the priest. This activation is the cause of universal inspiration of the psyche, mind, and soul. So it's talking about a shift in consciousness in which one is able to take with using the cannabis with spiritual intent in order to realize who we truly are in the universe in a spiritual context. So the incense upon the altar, the incense in general, symbolizes the regeneration of the spiritual body and involves the universal awareness of self and the universe, as well as the realization of the universal substance within the universe. The incense allows one to sense the spiritual substance within the body temple, or within the physical body. So the state of consciousness is then shifted to a spiritual state of consciousness, which allows for the expression of the spiritual being and character. And this meaning being wisdom of the absolute substance or the divine spark in man. The awareness or knowledge of wisdom, Divina Sapientia, through gnosis, of the true self within self, the true light within the universe. The incense involves the nervous system in the body through perception, as well as through the processes in mind, psyche. The priest in the temple uses the incense to balance the spiritual forces within the body to build a spiritual covenant with which becomes the connecting link or the gateway between mind, body, and spirit, the universal mind, or the divine spark. The incense allows the priest to obtain spiritual universal awareness and universal substance. Or the incense allows the priest to obtain a spiritual and universal awareness of the universal substance or divine spark through perception, observation, and experience. This is first-hand experience. So the incense, the use of cannabis as an incense, allows the priest to sense the universal creative source energy within the temple and regenerate the cells in the physical body, i.e. healing, and adjusting the mental body unto a spiritual state, or state of gnosis, wisdom, divina sapientia, knowledge of the divine spark in mystical indigenous realities of ourselves. So through the priest becoming aware of the soul or the divine spark, the indigenous self, the higher self, and the universal mind, his or her perception is turned inwards, and the inner observation brings upon an esoteric experience or beyond ordinary limited awareness, and an experience beyond ordinary limited awareness. And so this experience can only be obtained by the priest with the priestly state of mind, and it is only through the altar or the altering of the state of consciousness, or the physical representation of that which is the physical altar, which the priest can go within. So the priest realizes and understands from this perspective and understanding. The observation and experience of information as energy or matter is enhanced in a spiritual manner. So this spiritual enhancement is not belonging to humanistic material aspects of self. It's a spiritual enhancement, meaning it's beyond one's comprehension, one's initial conscious comprehension. So it's beyond the ordinary limited rational awareness or rational mind. So the burning of this divine incense upon the altar signifies the purification process within awareness or consciousness, which is needed for the priest to obtain a state of mind in which will allow him and her to realize and achieve at-one-ment or atonement with the universal life principle. This causes the priest to perform daily acts of worship, or daily acts. Worship means to identify self with. So daily acts of identifying self with the divine creative source through meditative states, or states of gnosis, divina sapientia, which causes a refining process that is produced in the awareness or consciousness. These daily acts are a process of refining the sense consciousness, or the sense conscious thoughts, unto a spiritual perspective, to have spiritual conscious thoughts. One continues to perform spiritual acts in order to achieve a state of spiritual understanding in relation to the creative life substance, or the substance within self, and substance which preconfigures creation in the universe. In relation to the creative life substance within as well as outside of self, the divine spark within self of a greater source, or beyond creation. The lighting of the incense, or burning the incense with fire upon the altar, signifies the mental acknowledgement of thought in a physical manner, as well as the observation of information turned inwards and understood from the innermost perspective through the Divina Sapientia aspect of self. The priest receives information from the universal creative principles and substance within, and they are expressed inside and outside of us in the forms of, for example, the aura, the chakras, these are the interactions of um, this divine fire within, as well as outside of ourselves. So the reason why we partake of this lighting of incense is a representation of the divine doing this within. Um, the incense purifies the inflow of new thoughts and gets rid of old non-spiritual thoughts, liberating self through acquiring a purified state through Divina Sapientia, or wisdom, divine wisdom of self. So, through the priest connecting with the supreme sources in its multiple forms and states, a state of harmony can be established, and through the expression of the divine information in man and woman and their character as a priest. The lighting of incense is done in reverence, honor, and adoration as a daily act of identifying self with the universal creative source within self through ritual acts which lead to divine states of gnosis, or divine realization or knowing of self. In order to understand self in a divine way, or understand the higher self, which leads to the spiritual understanding and being, manifesting a spiritual character. This is also talking about things within ourselves in a subtle way, not being able to see or recognize these things. Making an offering is important for the priest in order to receive divine inspiration, usually in the form of wisdom and spiritual understanding through Divina Sapientia. This is stuff within self. This is wisdom that no one else can give you. This is wisdom that comes from you, your inner higher self, your indigenous elemental self. The offerings come in many forms, but the incense is the most effective form for the priest to allow the inward observation. So, the lighting of incense is done for a spiritual purpose, and it is under the discernment of the priest in which this purpose exists. The lighting of the incense is a priest's way of refining the thoughts into a spiritual manner in order for him or her to understand life and realization, and from the realization of the universal source through spiritual information of self, of the universal spark within us. So the incense in and of itself is supposed to alter or affect consciousness through the states of gnosis, which gives us states of gnosis in a spiritual manner, and that depends on the state of mind of the priest. So it depends on the state of mind of the priest in order for him or her to receive Divina Sapientia. It shall give the priest a sensory experience of Elysium, or pleasure in life, divine gnosis, or this divine Elysium. All substances and objects that bring upon these states of consciousness and understandings can be used by the priest as a physical sacred offering in daily practice. This can give the priest a more spiritual perspective to life in understanding himself or herself in the universe and as a universal life principle within self. The incense brings a specific awareness to the priest who allows him or herself to understand the universe and self. This means allowing yourself to know the truth within you. So if the incense is physically burned, this represents the realization of truth, or the acquiring of spiritual gnosis and experience, which is transpersonal. and the divine principles of life within. There is a spiritual visibility and the priest has when the incense is burned, and is accessed when we have dropped all of our outer thoughts and have returned inwards to our center, and the thoughts of the priest are resting in the awareness of the divinity, of the divine self or the divine spark.